So this is where we open up the chat. If you want to unmute yourself, if you want to have your camera on for this section, you're very, very welcome to. I'd love to see some questions coming in. If we recap, we had Fritz with us first tonight. Hopefully Fritz can give us a wave. I'll go back onto gallery view so I can find everybody. There he is. Thank you so much. We were answering questions about accountability in the digital age and also around AI. And then we had Ansua, who was talking about some of the use cases and AI for good. And there's nothing better for my mind than to hear a big company, a Microsoft or one of the others, really showcasing the difference they're making in the world. And the great power, of course, they have to do that. So jump in with the questions. I'll just put a couple of quick links up at this point. I'll take the opportunity. We do have an ongoing chat, WhatsApp chat for MKAI. Everybody is welcome to join and share in those conversations. Also, of course, we post the updates and the information, and also the event there for September. And so go ahead and book yourself onto that as well. I see a few of you have done that already. And you'll see the great lineup that we have for next month with one more exciting speaker to announce. Alex, you're prompting me there to look at your question. Do you want to unmute yourself and ask it directly? Would that be okay?
Yeah, I think I am unmuted, Richard. Thanks
great.
for that. You hear me? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
But camera would be too much bandwidth, I'm afraid.
No problem.
The reality of the UK. Anyway, yeah, I was very interested in the Anglian Water thing. I'm an Anglian Water customer, as lots of us probably are around here. But slightly disappointed when you said, well, we're not storing all the data because we can't and it doesn't make sense to, so we just store the stuff we need. I would have thought these days that there are ways of storing all of the data you get from your sensors. And I would have thought that looking forward for Anglian Water, it would make an enormous amount of sense to store all of your sensor data and then analyze it using some really complicated AI, possibly neural nets, possibly something even more advanced than that, in order to predict these pressure transients. So rather than reacting to where you get them and tracking them down, maybe you can work out what's causing them if you take all the data and run a real AI algorithm over it.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't disagree with you, Alex. I think maybe when we're talking about that kind of edge computing and saving data, I'm being a little bit harsh in how much we do keep. It does vary depending on the sensors themselves. So it actually depends how that technology itself works. The sensors which do that edge computing and actually only send you the high frequency data when they reserve it, when they detect it, are measuring at 128th of a second. That is an awful lot of data, and honestly it is not much good for anything else other than being able to really precisely correlate your transients with each other. So in terms of understanding what's happening on your network, much other non-transient effects happen at a much slower kind of time scale. So it's less important to have that really high frequency for it, but I do absolutely take your point and completely agree that obviously data is power, power is knowledge, or vice versa, however you want to put it in this world. Another problem that we do have, of course, is understanding what's physically going on in the network. Obviously these smart sensors really help, but another problem you have is obviously when you do have a burst event, we're not quite sophisticated in the data collection on the actual operational side, so the boots on the ground. Obviously when a leak happens, you might be able to see it immediately in the data, but obviously when you're training a machine learning model, what you want to know is when that leak happened, like as a training set. And if we don't know that, because actually the leak was reported a couple of days later and it didn't take a technician another week to actually get out and see it, you start to enter a whole world of really messy data. So it's not always quite that easy, but absolutely completely agree with the vision.
Yeah, no, it's early days, obviously. Yeah.
Sorry, yeah, sorry, I just want to add to that. It's a constant balance, and I agree with the ambition. I think we'd want to get as much data as we could all of the time. The challenge we're always up against is the devices that capture the vast majority of these. They're not mains powered due to the difficulties of where they're located. They're battery powered, and it's really currently really hungry to power up that modem and send that data all of the time. it comes at a significant cost for us in replacing those batteries. So it's just about getting that balance. The suppliers are working extremely hard to make them more efficient, but at the moment we really are limited with just trying to get that to where we can really see, you know, a real good use case for that data and bringing that across rather than everything. I really hope in the future that, you know, that things are different, you know, solar power, who knows, whatever else, that we will be able to do that. But for now, for me, that's the biggest limiting factor. It's how energy hungry they are to get that data over.
Interesting. No, thank you.
It's a question from Niraj. I don't know if you want to ask it yourself, Niraj, if you're still here.
Thanks, Richard. So I just want to check, you know, one challenge we have is the quality of data and how we get the data. But another challenge is about the skill sets. So do you reckon which is a bigger challenge, you know, having the required skill sets within the organization, especially in utilities, if you don't have too many, you know, technical employees who are willing to embrace or who have the skill sets to embrace AI. So do you think it's a bigger challenge, or getting the quality of data is a bigger challenge?
For me, it's the biggest challenge is that the people and process element that always follows all of this. Ultimately, that's what's going to deem it a success, is the decisions we make off the back of it and our ability to implement them. And yeah, it's a huge challenge. And it's one that at the moment isn't probably getting the attention that the data quality and the master data management and all of the smart, I guess more interesting, you could say, elements are getting, but certainly something we're going to have to tackle as we progress.
Do you want to add to that, Jack, or not?
Oh no, I was going to hand that over to Rich anyway. It definitely comes better from him.
Very good, very good. And one quick one from me before we perhaps open up to some more questions. Where are you seeing the biggest opportunities in cost reduction? Because you've got the sensors, you've got the cost to buy the sensors, the cost to power those sensors, whether it's batteries, mains, or solar or something like that, and you've got the cost to send the data back and forth. Are you seeing those coming down year on year? Is it changing much or not really?
Not as quickly as I'd like it to be honest. I think battery technology has progressed very little really in line with other types of technology. So I'd say that's pretty slow. In terms of efficiencies, was kind of the root of your question. Where do we get the benefit and what does it enable? Is that your question?
Whether you're seeing any I suppose changes in the cost of doing that. Are you able to use any machine learning to reduce the size of the packets of data? Are you able to restrict down to kind of core information, or is that not feasible?
Well, I think that's the edge computing piece that some of these sensors are using. Obviously, the problem you have with doing anything too smart on the devices themselves is they can be really limited in what kinds of algorithms you can put on them, the complexity you can get there. Maybe less so with some of the newer ones, because I know a lot of them actually have Linux installed. But I know certainly on some of the older assets and ways of collecting data, there's some real problems in the kind of rules that you can put in.
Great, thank you so much. Shailesh, are you happy to read your question out?
Sure. I think I aimed it at Anusuya, but I think it's for the wider panel as well. Do we think that we don't highlight the good of AI enough? Because we of course hear of the problems of AI, as I said, on the A levels, for example, or whatever. But AI does a lot of good. I mean, of course, the people who are bringing it to life. But do you think we need to have more of it whenever something good has been done? That it gets more publicity so that people get motivated. So my kids actually like to listen to all of this, and they are thinking about it. But do you think we should highlight the good of AI more? And say that, yeah, this was actually possible, would not have been possible without AI, for example?
That's a wonderful question.
AI is really powerful, so we have to use it ethically. It could be used for good, as well as we as a community have the burden to use it for the good, because if not used ethically or not controlled correctly, it could be very powerful, and it could it could destroy a lot of good things we already have existing, which we don't need. There is already a lot of things happening. So I think more than AI, I would encourage learning about the ethics, learning about reducing biases. So that's basically what we need to keep in mind when we work with AI, more about the innovation, focusing on always asking if I'm using this ethically, if I am not introducing any bias. At this point of time, it's impossible to reduce any bias. But I mean, every human being is biased to some extent or another. But if you try to consciously avoid it, at least that's a good step forward. So I would say yes. I mean, I work constantly with students. I teach courses in UW. I am currently partnering with Stanford, teaching their master's graduate students. I work with high school students, and I am amazed every day how fast and intuitive this tool is and how great it is. The kids are picking up so fast. So I was not this smart when I was of their age. So I'm really amazed that how intuitive this tool is and how much empowerment it's giving to the newer generations. So, but it, I think, is on us to teach them how to control it, how to make them aware of the ethics and the biases that might get introduced. So that, I think, is the only thing that we can force. The rest, it's already there. It's already happening. I can see it affecting healthcare every day. I mean, I work with some doctors here. We're working on COVID stuff. So doctor is in ICU for 4 days. He comes out for the rest of the 3 days. We keep on working. So it's already is saving lives. It already is doing a lot of things. We are using it without even knowing we are using every day. In this chat, in our search, in like everywhere, whatever we do, we are surviving this pandemic because AI is there to make our everyday life possible. So I do not think it's a future. It's already there, and I can see the students and the next generation picking up pretty well. I think the only tool we need to give them is to make them concerned, to make them more compassionate, make them more understanding of fellow humans. I think that's the best thing that we can give them.
Thank you.
Thanks, Shadish, for asking that. Fritz, you must have some highlights from the conferences you've been to, some of the summits, some of the great use cases for AI for good. Well, what can you share with us that you've heard?
Richard, I was actually referring to, replying to a comment or question made in a text which refers to that. There are an abundance of examples, and it's almost impossible to go into just to showcase one individual one. But I think that the key thing to realize is that if you have all the UN agencies together looking at AI, these are not AI experts. These are people who deal with real day-to-day issues, like UNHCR does something with refugee crisis or climate crisis. And the basic awareness that doesn't really matter which SDG you're looking at, there is always some kind of issue where AI can provide a particular benefit to help solve real-world issues. I'll give you an example, and I very much would like everybody to have a look at a company called Odema, or actually a community called Odema, which is a global community of AI experts helping to solve the SDGs. One concrete example, which I find quite interesting, is how it actually helps in a situation where the issues are so complex that people can solve them individually because they're so interrelated. Like the impact of the refugee crisis on climate change. Odena has done a couple of projects where people realize that when you have a refugee crisis because of some kind of a war happening, which is happening in South Sudan, people are moving from one location to the other. And all these people who are moving are farmers. That means the ground, the area they're leaving is not being farmed anymore. So that's now turning into wasteland. And they're moving to places which never was able to cope with so many people there. So it's turning into a wasteland because of all the people coming in. So that's creating I would say a cascading effect, if I would borrow a utility term, of issues where trying to resolve this AI is actually the only it's turned out to be a great tool to help solve the very complex issue, understanding the consequences of those movements. Sorry, long answer, but that's just one example which comes to mind.
Fritz, I appreciate you answering that. And by the way, jump in, anybody who wants to steer this conversation as well. Don't let me monopolize it. But someone mentioned about storytelling. Fritz, yes, sorry, it was you that mentioned storytelling. So great to pick up on that point. We don't tell very good stories, though, do we? When you've got science fiction and questions around ethical businesses, people that don't stay in their lane, the press that give AI this kind of human identity, and then it's good or then it's bad. I mean, look at 5G. Look at how badly the telecommunications industry has told the 5G story, to the point of which people think it's a killer.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, I'm not going to argue the science here. I'm going to say that's not telling the story well, though, is it?
Fully agree. As an industry, and I'm talking to the IT industry as a whole, I mean, I used to work with a lot of CIOs, Chief Information Officers. And the difference between an extrovert CIO and an introvert CIO is the introvert CIO looks at his own shoes, the extrovert CIO looks at the shoes of the other CIO. That's basically the industry we live in. We do not understand the power of words of the story to get our message across. And that's where we really need to improve on.
Thank you. And so you've talked about the younger generation there. What sort of other examples have you got of different mindsets or different ways of thinking that you've seen?
I think it's a little bit outside of the realm of AI in general, but what I see information technology doing at the moment is a great enabler of the fourth industrial wave in moving the world from this siloed industrial era to one of command and from connect and collaborate. We're turning it into a global network. And that gives us so much more companies like Omdena, I'm glad you put it on there, can only exist because we have this information technology to actually make it happen.
And so what would you say to that same question about younger people?
Sorry. So because we're shifting into this other type of society, I do believe the younger generation, we have to cater for what they want, and they will not want to be stuck into these siloed industrial design organizations.
Yeah, I completely agree with Fritz here. I think there is a lot of various mindset that I see every day. There is curiousness, there is interest, which is being sparked by AI. I mean, it's, as you said, as Fritz was saying, the storytelling is very important. And with AI, everything is becoming very visual, right? I mean, you apply a few lines of code, you can see something visually very appealing. You love flying drones, and you can run some APIs and do detections. So yes, the storytelling is very powerful, especially for computer vision. But that's not the end to it. I mean, there is a lot more going in the background. So I always encourage my students to learn the basics. Learn. It's not only about using the APIs. It's not only about the cool things that you see. Learn about the basics, how things are emerging, how you can contribute rather than just stitching things up. Can you actually come up with something innovative, which I might not be thinking? And I'm amazed every day how they come up with a few things. For example, I was working with a student in California. She's in Caltech now, and she actually partnered with the fire department of California. We went together there when I was going for like business trips, and we actually collected images. We trained a few things. We actually gave the prototype to the fire department, and right now we are partnering with Oak Ridge National Lab. This has become a full-fledged project. So it's not only about it was sparked by just an interest of a student because she saw her schools being shut down because of the forest fire, devastating forest fire in California. So I think even small individuals can make a big change, and that's basically the motivation, the storytelling which Fritz was talking about. It's not only about, hey, I write a few lines of code and I see something visually appalling. The whole story actually evolves, and it takes in a lot more things. And as I said, it's really I'm really happy to see the students every day learning and doing so much more than we could have done without it.
Yeah. And actually, I'm referring to one of your colleagues, Brad Smith. I had the honor to have him invite him for a conference last year where he spoke on accountability in the Peace Palace. Very great.
He's my boss.
Okay, well, give him my regards. Great storyteller. But we also talked about, and I'm at the same time listening to you, what you're saying, but reading the comments in the chat. It's about sharing the effect of what we're trying to do. AI inside reminds me a little bit of when we started to sell cars a couple of years ago. It had, okay, this car has seat belts, or this car, we're not going to tell, okay, this car has a battery inside or has gasoline inside. At the end of the day, it should not be about AI. It should be about what we're doing. That's the type of story. So we're hooked up on wanting to promote the technology we're using rather than what it's actually doing.
I'm going to pop Brad's book up in the chat here, actually, that he released last year, Brad Smith, who's the president of Microsoft. Is that right?
Yes, he is the president of Microsoft.
Great. What leadership do you think Microsoft is displaying at the moment in AI?
Microsoft is my first industrial company. I've always been a researcher, worked in university and academic settings and nonprofits. And if like 10 years ago, somebody would have asked me, will you go and work for Microsoft? I would have no. But I'm so happy I am with Microsoft at this point of time with the changed, with Satya driving and, making, one of the motto that we follow is we need to empower everybody with knowledge in this world. So basically, and what better tool than AI to transfer the knowledge, the power of technology for them to do well for themselves. So that's where actually we come in. I think that's where big companies, and it's not only about Microsoft, I'm sure this leadership is being shown by Google, by IBM, by Facebook, and Amazon. There is tons, Salesforce, there's tons of other companies which I can keep on naming. But as I said, we just launched a White House consortium, HPC consortium with all of these leading companies together. It's not only about when you're trying to democratize AI, a new technology, a new kind of world, which is going to come down and affect all of us individually as a society. I think we need to join forces and we need to democratize this, efficiently tell the right stories so that we empower everybody in the world.
Fritz, you've mentioned Omdima, and they're not the only ones, of course, who have distributed teams of data scientists around the world. So clearly you would expect to see a lot of diversity in that. A question for you both, and obviously anybody else jump in that wants to contribute to this. How important are those external device independent teams on AI projects? Has Microsoft got access to people like that? Is that of interest at all?
Yes, so I can tell you about my team. It's a very small team of 10 scientists, and we all come from different backgrounds. I'm the only person coming from computer science background. There are people from politics, there are people from liberal arts, there are people from psychology, there is people from genomics, statistics. I can keep economics. I can keep on naming, but I'm the only computer scientist who actually work in this team.
How do you get any work done? You just must have interesting conversations all day.
Yes, we love to talk, and during this pandemic, we actually have every day 1 hour lunch session because we just cannot stop chatting. So anyways, we do partner with external partners, and I love the diversity of my work. I'm learning every day, and I cannot emphasize more on the ground workers. For example, I keep giving examples about health, right? The COVID thing. We would not have done anything we would not have gotten any insight if we were not partnering with the right researchers, the right doctors, to get the actual data coming from the hospitals, interpreting it, understanding it. For example, if somebody talks to me about body fluid and dehydration, I will get it. But somebody starts using respiratory rate, O2, intubation, I'm like, okay, I'm lost there. You have to explain it to me, what is happening. And these are all symptoms for COVID. And I have to understand if I'm to build a model around it, right? So those are hours long of communications. What are the phenotypes? What are the gene sequences? Is there a 6-sequence Neanderthal gene which is getting more affected by COVID? There is a very interesting research paper which came out. But anyways, I'm learning every day about those things. And this would not have, I'm just taking medical as an example. This is true for every domain that you work on or apply your tools like AI on. So you have to collaborate with AI, like domain experts. You have to collaborate with the ground workers, like for the Syria project. We would not have gotten anything done if we would not have collaborated and got the information from the thousands of ground volunteers working in the field. So this kind of collaboration is essential for an initiative like us to thrive. We are just the tools. They are the data, and combining only can tell a story together.
That's a really great answer. Paul Levy, do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, sure. I was just interested, particularly in the one where we're talking about water, that we are starting to use a language that almost developed since the computer calculator, when we'd say our little hand calculator, it's working it out. It's in a bad mood today, we'd say about the computer. We've been anthropomorphizing AI for a very, very long time. And my question is whether you think actually that is enabling us to develop AI, or whether it's actually becoming a bit of a narrow place for us to develop AI, because a lot of evidence around algorithms that are kind of proactive and able to create further algorithms themselves tend to evolve away from the human brain, tend to create, I've called them abhuman or alien forms of thinking that aren't similar to the human brain. And so I'm just wondering if we're getting ourselves caught the more we see AI as versions of the human being.
Paul, before you get an answer to that question, do you have any suggestions how we do things differently?
Well, I certainly think, for example, if we, as some people are doing, allowed ourselves to use language that might set AI back, because it's very hyped up at the moment. So instead of saying, you know, AI is artificial intelligence, it could be computer-aided decision-making. We can use words like processing. We might need to invent new words, but the more we start to use this language, it starts to idealize AI as an idealized version of the human being, and that's dangerous.
Thanks, Paul. But Fritz, I think about this, and you could say that AI, of course, is statistical inferences in large data sets, but as that's potentially going to be the wrong term soon, you know, we may see more logic and reasoning coming in, and AI needing far less data actually in the future. Difficult to get the language right, I would say. What do you think?
Well, in all openness, I do not know what the right language is. I do know this is the right question to ask. And it's something what we discussed before our call. I want to make people aware of one of the classic management books from Gareth Morgan called Images of Organizations. And I know you have the link, Richard, but this book will take the reader into a discussion, a thought process, how relevant the way we use language, the way we use an image, the way we use a metaphor is to understanding what it's about. So we really need to think about how we frame what we're doing. Yeah, the current label is artificial intelligence. That assumes something of what it is. Not sure if that actually is what we're building at the moment, but so don't have the answer to your question other than this is part of the discussion to make a success of it.
Thank you.
But I completely agree with you there, Paul. I think personally, I'm not a huge fan of the AI term, I must confess, but it's been around in popular culture for years and years, right? And people have an idea of what AI is. You think of things like the Terminator and, you know, various films where they've anthropomorphized things, and it does give you a sort of misleading idea of what AI is and what AI can be. I think for better or worse, unfortunately, it does seem to be the term, and it is what we're using, certainly at the moment. But exactly what AI is, it can be sometimes difficult to put a pin on, and I think having the discussion is absolutely the right thing to do, and greater communication about what AI is and how we're solving these problems in reality, I think, is key.
Great. Well, we've landed exactly on 7 o'clock. Thank you to our 3.5 speakers tonight, 4.5 speakers, excuse me. So Fritz, thank you so much for getting us started. Silvina, thank you so much. Say hello to Brad and Satya for us on our behalf. Good luck with TikTok if you want to buy it. My old company, Oracle's joined the race, so we'll see what happens there. Jack, Rich, of course, thank you so much as well for your session. Really, really useful to hear that. Thank you, everybody, for your questions. James and Tajam, thank you so much for leading in the other session. I'm hearing great feedback about that already. I'll get the videos up as soon as I can via YouTube onto mkai.org. So bookmark that page. You'll see them over the weekend or early next week, depending on how quickly we can turn them around. And I'll have a chat with Hans as well and see what we can do to get his information shared. So one last little plug for next month. So do save that link as well, drop in there and register. You've got a couple of options there. You've got the supporter ticket if you want one, and we're very grateful if you do. And you've got the inclusivity ticket as well, because of course everybody is welcome to join us in this session. And thank you so much for another enjoyable Thursday afternoon with this community. And I'll see you next time.